Welcome to the Bret Boone podcast. I'm your host, Bret Boone. Today, I'm joined by a guy. To this day, it's 2025 now. I still haven't got a hit off him. Two-time World Series champion, one as a player, one as a general manager. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Young to the program, general manager of the Texas Rangers. CY, thanks for coming on.
Brett, thanks for having me. By the way, I think I remember you homering off me. That's my memory of our at bats. So don't sell the audience on you never got a hit off me. I know better than that.
I'm telling I didn't do the research, but I remember going back to the bench more than I stayed on the field of your at bats. And I remember, Chris, I remember when you first came to the big leagues and you were in Texas and you were in the rotation. I come back and, guys, I said, I'm seeing it really good. I can't square it. I keep getting a pitch to hit and I foul it straight back. And then it got into, and I'm thinking, well, he is the tallest man in the world. And does it have anything to do with the angle that I can't get on top of it or something? But like I said, I was frustrated more than not. And I'm telling you, I wasn't the only guy. There were a lot of guys like Boone. I see it pretty good too. And I foul it back or I miss it. I can't square the ball. And I said, I don't know. He's doing something out there with angles or whatever, but you were tough. A great MLB career. Ended up winning a World Series in 2015 with the Kansas City Royals. But yeah, interesting. That's first thing when you agreed to come on, I thought to myself, I'm like, gosh, I couldn't get on top of that fastball. You and Billy Wagner. I couldn't do it either. Billy Wagner threw me ball. It looked like a beach ball coming in. I'd foul it straight back and I'd go, I can't square it. I can't square it. I don't know what it is, but some guys have your number. You had my number. I got to look it up. I don't believe that I hit a homer off.
I remember you homering off me. I just remember not wanting to face you. That's the primary. And you know what? I really don't remember. I can remember my really bad matchups in my career. I mean, Chipper and Vladdy and Ichiro. I mean, those guys just absolutely demolished me. I think they had more hits off me than they actually had at bats, and that's how much they dominated me. But I really don't remember many matchups. It's like it's sort of it's fading from my memory. That said, I remember not wanting to face you, and I think I vividly remember you homering in Arlington off me, or maybe it was a double a gap, but you got me. I remember. That's what I remember of our matchups.
After this podcast, I'm going to go back. I'm going to look it up, and then I'm going to text you.
Yeah, text me, please.
Tell you if you were right or wrong.
Yeah,
it is interesting. We're getting older. And you talk about those are distant memories from you. The matchups, you're so enthralled in your second career.
Right.
I have a brother that played a long time in the big leagues, had a really good career. And all of a sudden, he's more known now for being a skipper than he was a player. You start winning World Series as a general manager. I have to remind people, Chris Young was a pretty damn good pitcher, but all the success you're having in Arlington and congratulations on the World Series in 2023. That was pretty cool to watch. And I remember down the stretch, I had Boach on the podcast a few times, and he was, he was just walking me through it. Yeah, Boney, we're going to try to get through this round. And you guys you just executed. You did everything you had to do that year, and it ended up, as you know, that's what it takes. You got to have great talent, but everything's got to go right for you, and you got to play right at the right time, and you can't have a hiccup, especially today with the rounds. How many rounds you have to go through. Back in the day, it was 2 rounds and you're in the World Series. Now it's, man, you got to go through an armed field.
Right.
It's like, okay, we got 4 rounds to go. We just played 162 and we're starting the playoffs. It's not like it used to be, but congratulations on that.
To your point, Booty, to your point too, in today's game, I mean, in 2023, we had to fight our way into the playoffs. September was almost a pennant race. I mean, it was a pennant race for us. It was almost a playoff atmosphere all of September for us. And so it's really like back-to-back months. The playoffs are so intense as is, and then you add another month of that before of fighting your way in. It was a 3-team race. I think we won 90 games. The Astros won 90 games. We tied for the division. They had the tiebreaker. And Seattle won 89. And so, I mean, It was 3 teams fighting to get in a really tight division. So it felt like 8 weeks of playoff baseball. And there's no doubt that took its toll on us into the offseason and into 2024. And I think it's why it's so hard to repeat. In baseball, it is so hard. It's why we haven't had a repeat World Series champion since when? The Yankees in 97, 98?
Yeah. You're bringing me back now. I remember that. You finished the season in Seattle. You lost 3 out of 4,
Right.
have to get on a plane. I think you were originally going somewhere else. You had to
Yeah.
get on a plane and go play that play
Tampa.
because you lost 3 out of 4, and then you just kinda ran the table after. Yeah, I remember that
Yeah,
now.
we went from winning, if we had won one more game in Seattle, or Houston swept Arizona that weekend. So we needed either one game from Arizona, or we needed to beat Seattle 2 out of 4. We lost 3 out of 4. Houston swept. They won the division. They won the tiebreaker,
Right, right.
and we were the wild card. We had to fly from Seattle to Tampa. And I remember vividly in that flight, we were going over North Texas at some point during the flight, and Boch and I sit up at the front of the plane together, and we had the map up, and Boch was looking out the window, hitting on the window, saying, "We should be landing right now." He was so mad. It was so funny, and he was a little bit of humor with it, but nonetheless, we had another 2.5 hours in that flight, and but something changed on that flight when we landed in Tampa. All felt right with our team. Just we knew, hey, we're in the playoffs, we're healthy, anything can happen. Let's go get this. And the team just took off at that point. It was really pretty magical.
It is awesome because things can go 2 ways. When you're just kinda rolling in and you're the superior team to the Mariners at this point, you had the best offense in baseball, remember that, and you're thinking, "Okay, guys, just split the series. Let's get out of here. We don't have to go,
Right.
we'll win the division."
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you lose 3 out of 4. And I mean, it could go 2 ways right then. I mean,
Yeah.
it could be an absolute letdown
Yeah.
in that clubhouse, terrible flight, get on the ground moaning and groaning,
Yep.
or what you guys did and just kind of flip the
Yeah.
script. And that's what made it a little cooler is the last minute decision to the negative, which
Yeah.
everything at that time you'd have said anything but this ended up being the best thing for you, and you win the
Look,
trophy.
one of the things too that I give Seattle a ton of credit in that series. I mean, first of all, they were still in it coming into the series. I think they had to sweep us
You
to
had to
get
sweep
in,
you. Hmm.
but they were still in it. But when we won, I think it was the Saturday, the second to last day of the season, we won and eliminated Seattle. Houston was beating up on Arizona. Seattle the next day, they came out, they didn't roll over. George Kirby that Sunday threw one of the best games I've ever seen. He was unbelievable. And I think in fact at one point he threw a knuckleball in a tribute to Tim Wakefield
Yeah.
that was just nasty and struck out Corey Seager. I mean, Seattle was amazing, and they, to their credit, they didn't quit, and they fought, and they tried to keep us from winning the division, and that's what the game's about. And that it was a great weekend, a great series. Obviously, I think back fondly of it because it worked out for us, and we went on to win it. But nonetheless, what a great pennant race.
Yeah, you bring up a great point too with the football playoffs coming up, and they talk about the last game of the season.
Yeah,
Obviously, if you've enjoyed a good season, you have the right to play it safe and get your
right.
guys. The most important thing is being ready for that playoff
Yeah,
game, not only in football but in all sports. But there's also something, and I talk about it all the time. There is an integrity of the game that you have to kind of balance.
yeah,
I mean, if like Seattle's, you said Seattle on the last day of the season,
yeah.
they didn't lay down and just
That's
mail it
right.
in. They were eliminated uh, because other teams are watching and say, we
Yeah,
know you're eliminated, but it's important to us. So
yeah,
it's important that we strike that balance. Like I said, you
right.
play 162 games, you've earned the right
Yeah,
to set your roster, set your
I
pitching staff.
agree. Right.
But at the same time, you've got to keep that integrity of the game for
Yeah,
everybody watching, guys,
yeah,
because you've been on the other side before
yep,
when you need a team to play for you. And if they just
yeah.
roll over, you're kind of, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to infer that I don't think Seattle was trying to do Houston any favors in beating us, but I just they did.
You
They
just play the
protected
game. Just play the game. Yeah.
exactly. They protected the integrity of the game. I have a lot of respect for the organization, the way they went about it, and George Kirby that day. I mean, it's serious. I've seen a lot of baseball, as you have. It was one of the best games I've ever seen pitched. He was nasty.
Yeah, that staff, they're good. They get
Oh, it's
something
really
something
good.
in Seattle.
Yeah.
They gotta add to it, but that staff is a pretty special
Oh,
5 that they've
they're
got over
fun to
there right now.
watch. Not fun to face, but they're fun. As a fan of the game, they're fun to watch. It's a tremendous pitching staff.
I want to go to your to your career, and as we all do, we play our careers. I took a different path than you did. You went
Right.
straight from playing, I believe, into the commissioner's office, and then
Correct.
ended up being kind of the police that
Yeah.
polices all of us and sends us fines. Uh, and then obviously that rolled over into the general manager position that you currently hold.
Right.
When you were playing, now you're a Princeton grad. I know that because my son's a Princeton grad, and I told
Yeah,
him I
I
was having
know.
him
I
on,
know.
and I said,
Yeah.
"Yeah, Younger's coming on." I know you probably thought differently than I did down the stretch of my career. My thoughts back then, and man, was I naive. And I look back at that 37-year-old and go, wow, did I have a
Well,
lot to learn? But I thought, I'm going to go golfing. I'm going to go off in the sunset. And all of a
yeah.
sudden, 5 years later, I wake up and go, what am I doing? Uh, did you start thinking about this near the end of your career? Like, what do I want to do after baseball?
Yeah, I mean, and Booney, you can tell me. I don't know how you felt towards the last couple years. I knew the end was coming. My goal was try to make it to 40, but when I got to 38, my body was really breaking down, and I knew it was going to be hard. But I wanted to keep trying to go and give it a chance. And I got to 38 and got released at the end of spring training in 2018. I went back to San Diego, tried to make the Padres, and got released at the end of camp. And I was driving home from Arizona to Texas. I had a couple days before the season starts, and a few teams called and checked in, said, "Hey, we'd love for you to go to AAA for a week or 10 days. We'd love for you." One team even offered a big league roster spot, but they said they couldn't do it till after opening day, that they had told a young kid he had made the team. They can't take that away from him, which I respected. And they said, but hey, after opening day, we'll add you to the roster. And then the commissioner's office called me and said, "Look, we're not telling you you're done, but if you are done, we'd be interested in a position, finding a spot for you." And it was really at that point that it kind of dawned on me that this thing's coming to an end. One, I'm not very good. Two, physically, it's taken its toll. And three, the stress of being the last player on the roster and putting my family through that, I'm just not sure I have it in me. And the second I heard there may be another opportunity, a non-playing opportunity, I just felt like it may be time to turn the page. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. The only thing I wanted to do was be a baseball player. It's the only real ambition I've had in life, professionally. And so, and I've also heard stories at that point. I'd heard stories about players who felt lost when they were done playing, that they didn't have purpose, they didn't have direction, and probably had a little bit of fear in terms of that. And so I went home. I talked to my wife. I said, I'd like to go to New York and at least see what this is about. And when I got up there and started meeting with the people in New York, including the commissioner, I realized this is a unique opportunity to learn the game through a different lens and see a different side of the game that I had not been exposed to. It was going to take me away from the playing field and a lot of the stresses that come with being a player. I mean, Booney, you lived it and you understand. And I think this is something that at the end of the career, the stresses they're hard. I mean, you're fighting on a daily basis to go out and try to be the player that you think you can be in your head, but physically you're not quite able to be. And it's stressful, and you don't know what's to come. You don't know how long it's going to last. And just being away from the stress of competition, I felt like was going to be a good thing. And so it all went into the decision-making process. And about 3 weeks later, I decided this is it's time to turn the page. And so I accepted the position. And really, one of the great things that I was able to do was it was working in on-field operations under Joe Torre. And Joe was just somebody I had just held in the highest regard. And to go work 2.5 years with Joe and to develop a friendship with him and to learn from him, there's so many things that we've talked about and discussed that I've carried right into this role. He's been a great mentor for me, and I'm so thankful for the time I had with him. It was a wonderful experience.
That's awesome. So it just kind of organically happened. You worked with Peter Woodfork there as well. We've had him on the
Yep.
program. Yeah, it is amazing. And you mentioned when we're playing, and the transition
Yeah.
from being a big league player to real life. We like to say.
Right.
Um, I agree with you. I talk to young kids today,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But from what I've been through, what I've seen in this game, the advice I got from my father when I was retiring, he gave me really good advice, and I didn't take it.
Really?
Uh, and I try to tell the young kids today, I said, it doesn't mean when you retire. I mean, the money in the game today is
Yeah.
unbelievable. These guys really don't need a job when they're done playing. But it's not about that.
Right.
It's about your mind. And I try to tell
Mm.
them, listen, I'm not saying you have to retire and go to work full time, but keep your foot in the door.
Yeah.
Keep those sources close to you. Just do something,
Yeah.
and do it on a small level, because
Yeah.
I'm telling you, for your mental health, if
Right.
anything, it'll
Yeah.
keep you sane, it'll keep you involved, and,
Yeah.
yeah, that's I think that's really good that you
Yeah.
said something like that, because, yeah, we do something our whole life. When I look back, since I was a little kid, growing up the way I did with dad and
Right.
grandpa, and then I play my career, we as players, it's so intense. You talk about the competition side of
Right.
baseball. It's so intense. That's all we do is go, go, go. We don't have time to
Yeah.
smell the roses. And then all of a sudden it's over and you go, wait a minute, I thought I was just a baseball player my whole life.
You
And
got a
then it's
whole
not
life
there
ahead of
anymore.
you.
Right. And
Yeah.
you kind of don't know what to do because it's all
Right.
you know. I think
Right.
getting involved with something else, like you went on the administrative side,
Yeah.
and learn a different part of the game. I
Right.
think that's great, and that's transitioned to the job you're in now. And so, yeah, those young guys, if you're out there listening, you're getting to the end of your career,
Yeah.
do something. Keep your foot in the door.
Well, Booney, to
Keep
your point,
active.
I mean, two things. One, I love baseball. It's all
Yeah.
I've ever known, and I love it. And the game gave me more as a player than I ever deserved. I wasn't as talented as you, and I didn't have as successful a career as you. But I knew I wanted to give back to the game. I wanted to be involved in the game in some capacity. I didn't know what that looked like. I knew it wasn't coaching. I didn't think I was cut out to coach, but I didn't know I didn't know what a front office was or did. I didn't know what the commissioner's office, the players association. I didn't know what the avenue was going to be. But I knew I wanted to stay in the game. But I think to your point, you go from this, you have 100% clarity, focus, direction every single day as a player. You know exactly what you need to do to be successful. To all of a sudden, abruptly, it's over in a day's notice. It's over, and at that point you're searching and you're looking, and it's an empty feeling, and it's as somebody who's always had a purpose, that was a time at which I was really searching, and I'm very grateful that I had this opportunity in MLB, to continue giving back to the game and learning a different path to the industry that I had never seen.
What'd you learn on that administrative side of the game? What surprised you about it that you didn't necessarily expect?
Well, as a player, you always think that, hey, we should snap our fingers and do this to make the game better. And what I realize is that it's so much more difficult and challenging than just saying, hey, here's a good idea, let's just implement it and make change. And the biggest thing that I learned at the commissioner's office, and it was wonderful, I got to think about the game in terms of the big picture and the overall health of the game. I got to think about youth baseball and amateur baseball, and then player development, and really what the big league game should look like. What does it historically look like? Where are we right now? Where is the game, in a good spot? Where do we need to improve it? And those were things I never thought about as a player. It was always, how do you win? What do I need to do to succeed? And how do I make the team better? And then all of a sudden I got to be in an environment around really smart people, in the commissioner's office, who literally all they do is think about the big picture health of the game. And there were things and considerations that I had never even thought about, whether it's, the TV and the media rights and marketing, and just how we're going to continue to display our star players and grow the game. It really taught me a different perspective. And I realized just how big this industry is and how important it is and how critical it is that we all work together to try to, to continue to make this game the best game in the world.
2020, you make the transition, become the general manager of the Texas Rangers. was that organic as well? Was that something in the back of your mind, like I want to be a general manager next? How did that come to
No,
pass?
it wasn't. It was out of the blue. I was very happy in the commissioner's office. In fact, I was starting to take on a little bit more in the commissioner's office, and thought, it was at the end. It was after the first year of the pandemic. They got through the pandemic season, which, really, um, certainly nobody wants to go through a pandemic. But for me at that point, I probably got more exposure and learned about 20 years of industry knowledge in about an 8-month period, in terms of just seeing how, putting on a season in the pandemic. And so coming out of that season in the playoffs, there were a couple teams that called to check in to see if I would have interest in interviewing for general manager positions. And I was kind of blown away. I thought, I'm not ready for this. And there's nothing I've done in the commissioner's office that's really exposed me to the inner workings of a baseball operations department. But what I did have was industry knowledge and exposure to kind of all the different teams. And I got an under the hood look at 30 organizations, and kind of how certain organizations have functioned, and why some have been more successful than others. And I do think that experience served me well in seeing some of the similarities in the successful teams. And so, when those two teams called, I just felt like I wasn't ready. But then a third team called, and it was the Rangers. And I'm from Texas. I grew up here in Dallas. I grew up a Ranger fan. And John Daniels was a good friend of mine, and he called and said, "Look, I want to hire a general manager, and you're one of the people I'd like to interview, and I'm just curious if you have interest." And at that point, I really stepped back and said, "This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to go work for the team I grew up rooting for, and to help them win their first World Series championship." And I felt like, while I was very happy in my role at MLB, this was the one opportunity I couldn't pass up, and that's what went into the decision. And so I accepted the position, and came to Texas.
You talk about the competition when we're playing, and that's all we know is who we facing tonight. How do I feel? Am I locating? As a hitter, it's like, how's my swing? How am I going to trick them tonight? But it's all about winning, and it's every
Yeah,
day. There's no break.
yeah,
Um, you go to the commissioner's office, and you're putting out fires. You're learning the
yeah,
industry. Now all of a sudden you're a general manager. And now that competition spirit comes back a little bit. Like,
yeah,
no, now I got to win too. Now I'm a part of the team. I'm just not in uni. I'm doing it from my box.
yeah,
I remember, my dad worked for the Washington Nationals for
yeah.
the last 15 years. He worked,
Uh-huh.
and they won a World Series.
Yeah,
I think it was 19.
yeah,
And my dad doesn't really get emotional, but I remember him when they won, how emotional he got. He won a World Series in 1980 as a player, and I'm not saying you can ever recreate that as a
yeah,
player, but I just looked at him. I said, "Dad, pretty awesome, man." He goes, "Man, I put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears for the
yeah.
last 15 years to see these kids come along and finally win." And
That's awesome.
he was just as fulfilled, I think, as when he was a
Yeah,
player. I don't know if as much, but it was pretty cool seeing that side of him. Like, all right, because you're in the trenches in whatever capacity he was in. I think he had a VP role at the
right,
end,
right.
but it was he had a lot of investment, not only into the big club, and that was minimal on his. It was more
Yeah,
the minor leaguers, and he saw these
yeah,
guys develop. He saw the Sotos of the world come through the system and mature, and it all came to fruition. It was pretty darn cool. You get the general manager's job, you're in the seat. What kind of team did you inherit? I believe your first team was
yeah,
21. What kind of team did you inherit, and what were your first thoughts of to be that world class, the world championship caliber
yeah.
team, which you wanted to get to?
Right.
What had to be done?
Yeah, look, actually, let me pause on that question for a second, and just
Sure.
elaborate, for one thing, on your dad, because you're probably not even aware, but what you just described in terms of your dad's fulfillment, and him seeing other players and have the opportunity to realize their dreams and celebrate a World Series, and how much joy that brought him. To me, that's what this is all about. This role for me is exactly that. As a player, it was all about me on a daily basis. What do I need to do to help this team win? And it was a sole inner focus. Now in this position, it's about everybody else. It's how do I help everybody else in our organization realize their dreams? And what your dad described in that, he actually did something for me that you're probably not aware of that meant more to me than or as much to me as anything that's happened in my career. And in 2012, when I was coming back from shoulder surgery, I was living in San Diego and I was throwing at Canyon Crest High School. And your dad came out and watched me throw a bullpen. And he called up Mike Rizzo and said, hey, see why I can still pitch. It's not coming out hot. The velocity's not what it was a few years ago, but this guy still knows how to pitch, and I'd take a chance on him. And Mike Rizzo called, and they signed me to a minor league deal, brought me to camp, and I had a great spring training. At the end of camp, I didn't make the team, but Riz called the Mariners and kind of paid it forward and did the same thing and said, hey, this guy can still pitch. And anyway, your dad vouching for me and coming out and see me, that to me meant as much as anything that's happened in my career. It just speaks to, one, your dad's character, but two, when you tell me the joy that the World Series brought him because he got to see these young kids realize their dream, it doesn't surprise me at all. It's a really, really cool thing. So I appreciate you sharing that feeling he experienced with me. It's really neat. But as it relates to the question that you asked, I came in December of 2020, and John Daniels brought me in to be the general manager under him. He was the president, and the Rangers were fully committed to a rebuild at that point. The hope was that in a market of our size here, one of the top 5 or 7 biggest markets in baseball, that this shouldn't be a 5-7 year rebuild. This should be a pretty quick, 2 to 3, 4 year rebuild, but that we had a lot of work to do. And so it started immediately. And in 2021, the first season on the job, we lost 102 games. 2022, my second year, we lost 94 games. And so those were painful seasons, despite the fact that we were committed to a rebuild and going with our young players and really building our farm system. Losing sucks. There's no other way to put it. And I've never been good at losing. And I certainly, it brought out the worst in me in those seasons. So it was really, really tough. In August of 22, our owner made a change and elevated me to the number 1 position. And we, at that point, had a ton of work to do. Again, we were a 94 loss team. But the one thing that I did see and felt confident in is, despite the win-loss record, I thought there were some underlying metrics that suggested our record was much better than what it was on paper, that we should have performed much better. And I felt like if we could, find the right leader in the dugout, the right leader to really kind of guide the group and instill a confidence and conviction in the group, and if we could fortify our pitching staff, that we would have a chance to kind of turn things quickly, that our players at the upper levels of the farm system had kind of gotten on the cusp of the big leagues, that we felt good about being able to rely on them. We had financial flexibility and resources to supplement in free agency and bring in the right the free agents to kind of push us to the next level. And so, the thought was that if we can, in our offense in 2022, in that 94 loss season, I think it still performed, I think they were a top 5 offense in the American League. So the thought was that if this could all come together, if we could stay where we were offensively and we could add to the pitching and get the right leader in the dugout, that this might come together quickly. And, Booney, I'd be lying if I said I thought we were going to win the World Series going into the 2023 season. But I've also been part of teams where you just never know what's possible. And it's not about the most talent to win. It's about the right group of guys that come together and that play for each other and fight with a conviction and a focus. And that's exactly what the team did in 2023. And so much of it was because of Boch's leadership and really what he instilled in that group in terms of confidence and conviction. And it was just really magical to see it all happen.
I think you're right when you talk about a special group of guys, and it doesn't happen every year. Talent comes and goes, and you do have to have a certain amount of talent in this game to win the World Series. But it doesn't mean it's a for sure thing if you're more talented than the other team. It's that group of guys. It's guys that genuinely are pulling for one another, not just clapping when they're supposed to clap, saying the right thing when they're supposed to see it, but genuinely pulling for one another. Once you got that, you got a tough opponent in that dugout.
What's funny is I learned a great lesson after the 23 season, because we had, I believe on that 23 team, we had 7 or 8 or maybe even 9 veteran players who I don't think any of them even played in the playoffs. I think they were either injured or were not on the playoff roster. But every single one of those guys played a huge, impactful role in our clubhouse in establishing the culture and doing exactly what you just described on a daily basis, keeping the culture, the environment light, keeping the guys focused, and just helping the young guys through those tough times. And all of those guys were free agents after the 23 season. And I think we were only able to bring back one of them. And I truly think we felt the impact of that in 2024, where we went with a younger, maybe more talented athletic roster, but a roster that didn't have as many veteran players. And those veteran players were just so important in the culture that we had in 2023 and the role they played in helping our guys stay focused and truly cheering for one another.
Yeah, it's not you don't just find that anywhere. I think you mentioned Bruce Bochy. Man, you got a chance to play for him as a player. I played for him for one season in San Diego.
Uh-huh. What year was that?
That was 2000.
Okay.
And he's just he's one of those guys everybody knows. We don't have to talk about. He's the big teddy bear in the room.
Yeah.
But he's that guy that you go through and through the channels of Major League Baseball and us in the offseason doing events. Not one time in my life, and I would challenge you. I'm sure you haven't heard anything either. He's just one of those guys. When the name Bruce Bochy comes up, it's universal.
Yeah.
It's I love Boch.
That's right.
Everybody. I've never heard one guy say I don't love Boch, and that's very rare. And I remember having Boch on the. This is a funny story.
Uh-huh.
When I first started the Bret Boone podcast in 21, Boch comes on. Hey, Booney, and it was a great show. So I have him back. So I get a phone call from him a couple weeks after he's retired at the time.
Yeah.
He was taking care of some health issues, and
Uh-huh.
he called me. He said, "Hey, Booney," he said, and I don't mean to do his voice all the time.
Uh-huh.
I can't help. He said, "I'm thinking about doing a podcast. Can I get some advice?" I said, Boch, are you serious? He goes, yeah, they've come to me. I'll have an assist. I'll have somebody, a straight man in the room or a straight woman in the room. He was going to have a co-host. And I said, let me tell you, Boch, and I'm laughing at it because this is the time where I'm just starting in my head spinning. I've never done a podcast where I don't know what this is all about. I said, let me tell you, if you want to do it and you're ready to go, it can be a lot of fun.
Right.
To watch it grow, to watch people get involved and see the numbers go way up. I said, but don't think you're just going to plug your computer in on Tuesday and start riffing and you're going to have a great show. I said, there's a lot more that goes into it than you think. The prep work, the guests, everything leading up to it. When a guest cancels and you've got to have a backup guest, but you really didn't want that backup guest, but you got him now. I said, all the little things you don't think about when you're talking to the media. I remember as a player, and you do too, is you have interview requests and you say, yes, yes, yes. Well, sometimes something comes up throughout our day and go, hey, I can't do the 4:15 and it's 3:45.
Right.
As a player, we don't think twice about it. Like, you didn't do it on purpose. Something came up. You had to go to the training room, get something handled. And they always give you the smile like, hey, no problem. We'll get you next time. Well, the wheels behind, like we were planning on him at 4:15. Who are we going to get to put in?
Right.
You never factor that in when you're on the other side of the microphone. So I was explaining all this to Boch. I said, Boch, I think you'd be great because you're Bruce and you'll have stories for days and everybody loves Bruce Bochy. But don't think you're just going to mail it in. You got to, it's going to take a lot more work than you think. And we had a long conversation, never ended up coming to fruition. Had him on the show again. And I said, this is, I don't think this is when you hired him, but it was 6 months in advance. I said, Boch, how you feeling? Booney, I'm feeling great. I said, you going to manage again? I've been thinking about it. So when you hired him and he came back, I just thought, wow, what a cool fit.
Yeah.
What a cool comeback story for Boch. What an awesome thing for CY to his first manager be able to hire Bruce Bochy, who I know you love like I love, and that's the reason. Boch is one of those guys. If you're in the interview process and you've got 5 managers you're going to interview, and then Boch comes available and says he'll come out of retirement, it's kind of like, cancel those
Yeah,
interviews. It's just what we
exactly.
do. He's one of those
Yeah,
special guys that I think transcends generations.
completely.
Everybody today wants to talk about the new game, and I think there's a lot of great things about the new games and the analytics and the
Yeah,
data and the way we've come as Major League Baseball has come and really
yeah.
progressed. And sometimes they talk about, oh, that old school. It's almost kind of a bad word. But I saw Bruce coming in. I'm like, this guy doesn't matter because he's that old school combined with that new school. Everybody will love him. These modern day kids will love him. The guys that played with him in the 80s love him. The guys that played for him in the
Yeah.
90s love him. He's one of those guys that I think transcends time. You could plop him into any era and he'd be the great Bruce Bochy.
It's such a great point that you make. I'm so happy you say that because I get asked all the time, like, how, talk about Boch being an old school manager and managing in today's modern game. And I describe exactly what you just said is that old school is almost an insult to him because he's a talented, great leader, and
Yep.
leaders can lead in any generation. It does not matter that he is older. Dusty Baker's the same way. Terry
Yeah.
Francona. These guys are great at what they do, not because they're old school. It's because they're great leaders, and that's what I think is lost in this, is that Boch has adapted and he has evolved and he understands people, he values information, and he blends the two, and that's what leadership is. And there's no absolutes in this game, and I think that that's the one thing that I have sometimes trouble probably articulating to the media regarding Boch, because he is so naturally gifted and talented as a leader. And to your point, he connects with everybody. He just makes everybody feel good about themselves on a daily basis. And those leadership skills they're hard to find. And that's why he's been a great leader and manager and a Hall of Fame manager for so many years in the game. So it's not, if he was old school and never evolved, he wouldn't be managing today. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
Boch is as good as they get in terms of blending, the leadership skills with the progressive elements of the game, and understand, and also having the wisdom of his years of experience. But it just, I could not be more thankful to work with him. One of the best pieces of advice that I got was from an old scout in our organization, who told me, he said, "See, why I don't know what you're going to be looking for in this, but my advice to you is find somebody that you're going to enjoy working with on a daily basis, that you're going to be able to laugh with on a daily basis." And I thought, that's really, really good advice, because we're going to go through a lot of hard times together. But if we can go into, if I can go into a meeting or walk down to his office on a daily basis and we can laugh about something, we're going to be in a good spot. And that has been exactly it with Boch. I mean, there has not been one day where I don't look forward to going into his office and hearing, a funny line or a joke or something that he's got. And he's just so incredible. It's been the best blessing for me being able to work with him, and I'm looking forward to a great year with him.
Yeah, it's really a perfect match, and it's the mutual respect that you guys have one for one another, and I people ask all the time, and I say, the great managers I've played for, they've got, first of all, they've got a great gut.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can play the computer.
Yeah, that's right.
Put a robot down there,
Yeah,
but I think to be great, you got to have a gut, and
that's right.
sometimes in crunch time, the great ones have that gut that say, no, this is the move. I think Boch has that. Boch has that unbelievable way of making everybody feel special. He knows the buttons to push to get the best out of each individual personality. He's always had that. That's what makes him a special guy. I'm sure he's great to work with, from field manager to general manager. And I think in this game today, from what I've seen from the managers that I've played for, is the great ones have a really good relationship with their general manager. They're like-minded. Doesn't mean you don't have debates and you can disagree
Yeah,
here and there on things. I
yeah,
think that's healthy. But
yeah.
at the same time, they're like-minded and they're on the same page, and it's clockwork. I think those are the great relationships.
Well,
Your
I'll
relationship. Go
this
ahead.
one of the things that I was a little bit worried about is that Boch has been around some great general managers. I mean, Boch worked for Kevin Towers and Brian Sabian, and he's been around some of the great ones. And for me, as a young general manager, I was a little worried that, hey, I don't know if I'm good at this job or not. And Boch, he may not find me enjoyable to work with. He may not think I'm very good, and he's seen what the best look like. I hope that he enjoys it. He seems to. I think we have a great relationship, like I said, but he's been around the best, and that was one of my hesitations in terms of I hope that I can be good enough for him because he deserves the best, and that was something that came to mind when we were going through the hiring process, and still to this day, I don't take for granted that Boch knows what this looks like, and I better be good at what I do because he deserves the best.
When you take that GM, what was your gut feeling going into this job? You have an ownership with the, or you sorry, you have a relationship with the owner. You
Yeah,
have the relationship with your manager,
yeah,
but also I had Jim Bowden on recently, who was my general manager when I
yep,
played the '90s for the Reds, and he said, "Booney, the GM position has changed so much. They have so much more on the table with the analytical
yeah,
department." And I mean, I'm looking at it. You get obviously you got to take care of the big club in your position,
yep,
but you've got the minor leagues, you got scouting, you got the draft. How
yeah.
do you in your role find a way to delegate what you need to delegate?
It's a great question, and honestly, it's something I never really had a lot of previous experience. I mean, how do you delegate as a player, right? How do you just everything on as a player you're in control of, and now in this role, I feel like there's so little, oftentimes that I can control, which makes the job challenging. I think the biggest thing, and I've read a lot of books. I read a lot of leadership books as I kind of got into this, and just have studied a lot of other leaders. I've had a lot of conversations with leaders throughout our industry and other sports teams, just to understand, how to be good at this job. And by no means do I have much of it figured out. But in the end, it kind of comes back to me. It's about people. It's about creating a culture and an environment and finding ways to get the best out of people. And it's not much different than what you described as Boch's biggest attributes, that everybody loves him. And while I don't feel like everybody loves me, I do feel like I want to give people vision and clarity and set expectations and then empower them and support them to go do their jobs. And there's so many areas of a baseball operations department now. It's vastly different from when you and I played, and even the generation before us. It's much more complex, and there's so many things to manage. There's no way any one person can be great at every aspect of it. So the critical piece of this is finding people around you that you trust, who share similar values, who have the same vision, and then allowing them to go do their jobs. And so that's been the biggest part for me. I'm very thankful for the team that we've built in the front office. And I think that's what's led to our success in winning the 2023 World Series, and hopefully what will continue to propel us forward in the future.
Going into 2025, you've had a busy offseason. Soto and New York, and they're always going to get the headlines. They've
Yeah,
been out there, and Adames signs with San Francisco there.
yeah,
But I've been looking at you guys. You're kind of sneaky, getting some stuff done, and that's not to mention. I knock on wood, if you can keep DeGrom healthy and him
that's
be
right.
a big part of that starting rotation, that's a game changer right there.
Yeah,
But Higashioka, you bring him in to back up Heim, but be a part of that.
yeah,
I've been watching Higashioka for a long time. He's This guy's got some pop. And I'll tell you, it seems like every time I tune in, he's hitting a home run. I think he's a great addition. I think Nathan Eovaldi, one of the guys, going to be at the top of that rotation,
yeah,
signing him back. Man, I've watched him through the years from Boston. Early on, he was in New York to Boston to the Texas Rangers.
yeah,
He's a gamer. He's a guy that you want on the hill in a big game. It was great
yep,
to see him back. You got Jake Berger, Webb, Garcia. And then you signed Jock Peterson, who
yeah,
has he has a nose for the finish line. He has a nose for getting to those World Series somehow. He's eccentric and he's
yeah,
out there.
yeah.
But I'll tell you what, he's had success everywhere he's gone. So I think sneakily, you guys have had a really good offseason. couple that with the potential in that offseason, the young kid, Langford, Carter, who missed the majority of the season, who was such a boon for you guys down the 23 stretch. He'll be back. Garcia's had the huge year 2 years ago, had a little bit of an off year, but we've seen his potential, and obviously kind of your two captains in the middle,
Yeah.
Simeon and Seager. I'd love to see start to finish Seager healthy year. I mean, he's an MVP guy. He's one of my favorite guys.
Yeah.
So talk about the offseason and your outlook going into the 25 campaign.
Yeah, Booney, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think, first of all, as we went into the off season, I said to our local media that the biggest additions that we are going to make to our club to improve from 24 to 25 are going to be internally keeping our guys on the field, getting the best out of the players we have and keeping them healthy on the field. And that there's no doubt that in 2024, the injuries to Evan Carter and Josh Young, our starting third baseman, they impacted us. It set us back, and then you add that to Corey Seager had missed the last month with an injury, and then we had some underperformance of Adolis Garcia had a tough year coming off a great playoff and World Series. He was injured and banged up after the World Series. He really couldn't train in the off season and came into spring training. We had to kind of baby him along to protect him and build him up in a responsible way. And he just was behind the eight ball to start the season from, really the hangover of the 2023 playoffs. And so, he was a big piece. So you take right there. And then Jonah Heim also had a tough season from a performance standpoint. He was healthy, but he wasn't himself. And so you take kind of Garcia and Heim, who stayed healthy but weren't performing at their accustomed level, and then you take out Josh Young and Evan Carter. I mean, that's 4/9 of the lineup for us, and that was a tough thing for us. We really struggled offensively. We went from being an elite offensive team in 23 to being a very average to below average offensive team in 2024. So I think the key for us bouncing back in 2025 is we're going to have to hit again. We're going to have to be an elite offensive team. The majority of teams that made the playoffs and won their respective divisions were elite offensive teams. And that's what we're looking to do. So, offensively, we are in a great spot. Seager is healthy. Garcia's had a tremendous offseason. Heim has had a great offseason. Josh Young is healthy. Evan Carter. We've got a young Wyatt Langford, who I'm so excited about. He had a tremendous rookie season. There are a lot of things offensively with the group we have that suggests that we're going to be able to bounce back. And then you add Jake Berger, who to me is one of the more underrated, talented players in the game. This is a guy who's had, I think he had 29 homers last year. He's got real pop, and I think adding him to our lineup should hopefully allow him to continue to develop and improve and build on what he's done thus far. And then to your point, Jock Peterson. Jock is somebody who just has that winning spirit. It's hard to describe kind of what that is exactly for those who haven't played, but this is a guy who on a daily basis kind of shows up with an energy and a belief and a conviction that is infectious, and it rubs off on guys. And he's been on winning teams, and same with Kyle Higashioka, just a complete winner. He's been on winning teams his whole career, and the opportunity to bring him in to pair with Heim and split time behind the plate, these two are going to be really, really good for us, and they're going to make our pitching staff better too. So, and then on the pitching side, bringing Evo back was huge. He's a winner, a guy that obviously helped us win the 23 World Series, a guy who's won multiple World Series championships, but I think what people don't see is who he is in the clubhouse, and just the personality, the leadership, the investment in younger players that he brings. He's just a tremendous person, and that's something that we were equally excited about in terms of bringing him back. And then, Jacob is one of the big keys for us. We got to keep Jacob on the field, but when Jacob's out there, he is as good as they get, and we're so excited about his recovery. Made it back at the end of last season, had 3 really good starts. He's had a great off season. He's feeling great. And, we may have some bumps in the road over the course of the season. We expected that when we signed him. But if we keep Jacob out on the field, it should be a fun year. And I remember the first time seeing him pitch in a Ranger uniform. It was opening day of 23. And it was like this excitement that I felt that, I'm going to get to watch one of the best players in the world pitch today. It was just that excitement coming to the yard every fifth day and thinking that to me, it's so exciting to think that we may have that possibility. So he's a huge key to our success, and we're excited to get him back. So I think, you can tell I'm passionate about our team. I'm excited about what we've done. But we have work to do. We're still trying to improve our bullpen. We feel good about where it is. We're still trying to improve it. But ultimately, it doesn't matter about the talent. It's how this group comes together and how they play for one another. And do they have that belief, that inner conviction, that fight? And that's where Boch is so good at working his magic and instilling a belief and a focus in the players. But it's a hungry group. Nobody was satisfied with 2024. My hope is that we come out and have a great season, and it's going to be a heck of a division with Houston, Seattle, Anaheim's improved, and I love what Oakland's done. I really love David Force. They do such a great job there, and I love that team. Mark Kotze, I know he's a buddy of yours. Kotz is just a wonderful manager, and Oakland's going to be really, really tough too. So it's a tough division. We've got our work cut out for us, but I believe in our group, and I'm excited about what we've done.
No, I agree with you. I think the division has gotten better, like you mentioned. Angels, not off the chart improvements, but they're definitely better, going in the
No
right
doubt.
direction. Chris, this was great. I appreciate you coming on to the Boone Podcast. For those of you out there watching the Boone Podcast, now we have our own channel on YouTube. Check it out. For those of you download the podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time. Keep it here. Thanks, CY. I appreciate it, man.
Brett, thank